Welcome back to Self Theory, the channel where we decode the hidden mechanics of your mind, your money, and the way you move through this modern world. Today we're tackling something that sounds almost contradictory on the surface: how to have fun while working. And I know what you might be thinking: fun and work in the same sentence? But stay with me here, because by the end of this, you might completely reframe how you approach the hours you spend earning a living. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. Most people treat work like a transaction. You trade hours for money. You endure the discomfort now so you can enjoy life later. The weekend becomes this promised land. Retirement becomes this distant paradise. And everything in between? Just something to survive. But here's the problem with that mindset. You're not just trading hours, you're trading your life. And if you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week in a state of low-grade suffering, waiting for permission to enjoy yourself, you're essentially postponing your entire existence. The ancient Stoics had a concept called memento mori. Remember that you will die. It sounds morbid, but the point wasn't to make you sad. It was to make you present, to remind you that this moment, right now, is the only one you're guaranteed. And if that's true, then shouldn't we figure out how to actually enjoy the process of working? Not just the paycheck at the end? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every job is secretly amazing if you just think positive thoughts. That's not how this works. Some jobs are genuinely soul-crushing. Some work environments are toxic. And sometimes the best move is to leave. But even then, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, there's a psychological architecture you can build that transforms how you experience effort itself. Let's talk about flow states. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he called optimal experience. He found that people report the highest levels of happiness and engagement not when they're relaxing, but when they're deeply absorbed in challenging activities. Think about that. Not vacation, not Netflix, not scrolling through your phone. The peak moments of human experience come when we're working on something difficult, something that stretches us, something that requires our full attention. Flow happens when there's a match between the challenge of the task and your skill level. Too easy and you get bored. Too hard and you get anxious. But in that sweet spot, something magical happens. Time disappears. Self-consciousness fades. You become one with the activity. And here's the thing. Flow doesn't care what you're doing. It can happen while coding, while writing, while cooking, while solving a logistics problem, while having a difficult conversation with a client. The activity itself is almost irrelevant. What matters is how you engage with it. So the first key to having fun while working is this: find the challenge. If your work feels monotonous, ask yourself, am I actually pushing myself, or am I coasting? Because coasting feels safe, but it also feels empty. The brain craves novelty and difficulty. When you deliberately seek out harder problems, when you set personal standards that exceed what's required, you activate reward systems that transform drudgery into engagement. But there's another layer here: intrinsic motivation. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan developed something called self-determination theory, and it identifies three core psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When these needs are met, we don't just tolerate work, we actually enjoy it. Autonomy means having some control over what you do, how you do it, and when you do it. Even in rigid jobs, there's usually some margin for personal choice. Maybe you can't choose your tasks, but you can choose your approach. You can choose your attitude. You can find micro decisions that give you a sense of agency. Competence means feeling like you're good at something and getting better. This is why mastery is so satisfying. Every time you improve, every time you solve a problem you couldn't solve before, you get a hit of intrinsic reward. The key is to track your progress, to notice your growth. Because if you're not paying attention to how far you've come, you'll miss the satisfaction that's already there. Relatedness means connection. Working alongside people you respect, people who see you, people who share your goals. This transforms the experience completely. Even if the work itself is tedious, doing it with others who matter to you makes it meaningful. And if you're working alone, you can still cultivate relatedness by understanding who your work serves, who benefits from what you do. When you connect your effort to human impact, the work stops feeling abstract. Now let's talk about something counterintuitive: play. We tend to think of play as the opposite of work. Kids play, adults work. But that distinction is cultural, not biological. Your brain doesn't know the difference between play and work. It only knows engagement. And the characteristics of play, exploration, experimentation, creativity, low stakes, curiosity, these can be injected into almost any work context. Think about how a child approaches a new toy. There's no pressure to get it right. There's no fear of judgment. There's just exploration. What happens if I do this? What about this? That mindset is available to you right now in your work. What if you treated your next project like a game? What if you set arbitrary challenges for yourself just to make it interesting? What if you competed with yourself to beat your previous best? There's a story about two bricklayers. Someone asks the first one what he's doing. He says, "I'm laying bricks." They ask the second one the same question. He says, "I'm building a cathedral." Same job, completely different experience. The difference isn't in the task, it's in the frame. And you get to choose your frame. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote about finding meaning even in suffering. He observed that those who survived the camps often had something to live for: a purpose, a person, a project. And he argued that meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. You inject meaning into experience through your attention and your interpretation. So when you're doing work that feels meaningless, ask yourself, what meaning could I create here? Maybe the task itself isn't meaningful, but your approach to it can be. Maybe you're developing discipline. Maybe you're practicing patience. Maybe you're learning something about yourself. Meaning is a lens, and you hold the lens. Let's get practical for a moment. One of the most effective techniques for enjoying work more is what I call the craft mindset. Whatever you're doing, treat it like a craft. A craft is something you refine over time, something you take pride in, something where the process matters as much as the outcome. When you adopt the craft mindset, you stop rushing through tasks just to finish them. You start paying attention to quality. You start noticing details. And paradoxically, this makes the work more enjoyable, not less. Because when you're fully present with what you're doing, when you're invested in doing it well, the experience itself becomes rewarding. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai, roughly translated as your reason for being. It sits at the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Most people never find their ikigai because they're looking for it as some external discovery. But ikigai isn't found, it's cultivated. You develop love for things through engagement. You get good at things through practice. You discover what the world needs by paying attention. And compensation follows value creation. If you're waiting to find work you love before you start enjoying work, you might wait forever. But if you start bringing love to the work you're already doing, curiosity, care, attention, pride, you might be surprised at how the feeling of love follows. Now, I want to address something important: toxic positivity. I'm not telling you to gaslight yourself into thinking a bad situation is good. Some workplaces are genuinely harmful. Some bosses are genuinely abusive. Some jobs are genuinely misaligned with your values. And in those cases, the answer isn't to reframe harder. It's to leave. But here's the nuance. Most situations aren't purely good or bad. They're mixed. And in the mixed situations, you have leverage. You can influence your experience through how you engage. The goal isn't to pretend everything is fine. The goal is to take ownership of the parts you can control. There's a concept in cognitive behavioral therapy called the cognitive triad. Your thoughts about yourself, your thoughts about the world, and your thoughts about the future. When all three are negative, you spiral into despair. But when you can shift even one of them, when you can find agency somewhere, the whole system changes. So ask yourself, what aspect of your work do you actually have control over? Your attitude? Your effort? Your learning? Your relationships with colleagues? Your side projects? Your skill development? There's always something. And when you focus on that something, when you pour your energy into the controllable, you stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances. Let me share one more framework: the energy audit. Most people think about time management, but they ignore energy management. Not all hours are equal. Some hours you're sharp, creative, focused. Others you're depleted, distracted, running on fumes. And when you try to do demanding work during low energy periods, it feels like torture. But when you align your most important tasks with your peak energy windows, work becomes dramatically more enjoyable. Track your energy for a week. Notice when you feel most alive. Then ruthlessly protect those windows for your most meaningful work. Push administrative tasks, emails, meetings, all the low cognitive load stuff to your low energy periods. This isn't about working more, it's about working smarter. And when you work during your peak states, flow becomes much more accessible. Here's the deeper truth underneath all of this. Fun isn't something that happens to you, it's something you create. It's an active process, not a passive reception. And the people who enjoy their work aren't necessarily doing more enjoyable work. They've just learned how to engage differently. Work can be a source of suffering, or it can be a vehicle for growth, connection, mastery, and meaning. The difference isn't in the work itself, it's in you, your attention, your frame, your choices, your engagement. And that's actually liberating, because it means you're not dependent on external circumstances to enjoy your life. You hold the keys. You always have. So the next time you sit down to work, try something different. Don't just go through the motions. Get curious. Set a challenge. Connect with someone. Find something to master. Inject a little play. Remember why it matters. And watch what happens when you stop treating work as the opposite of living and start treating it as part of living. If this shifted something in how you think about work, if it gave you even one idea to take with you into tomorrow, then we've done something meaningful here today. That's what self-theory is all about, giving you frameworks that actually change how you experience your life. If you're not subscribed yet, this is your invitation. Hit that button, leave a comment telling me what you're going to try differently this week, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.